Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. In less than 24 hours from now, Donald Trump's 50% tariffs on Indian goods will take effect. No deal has been reached, no last-minute announcements from the US president, no sign of a breakthrough. Washington has formally informed New Delhi that at midnight New York time, the new duties will be enforced. Indian markets have already reacted. They closed in the red today. But New Delhi is not changing course. On the eve of the deadline, Prime Minister Modi has sent a firm message. India is ready to absorb the short-term pain. It is backing manufacturing to offset the impact of Trump's tariffs. Tonight, we'll bring you the key takeaways from the Prime Minister's address. Meanwhile, the US president is widening his trade war. He is now threatening higher levies on countries that target US tech giants. And he has warned China of a 200% tariff if Beijing cuts rare earth supplies. Also in focus tonight, Trump's meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. Is the White House now shifting focus to North Korea? An exclusive interview with Fiji's Prime Minister who's visiting India. How 2 Israeli strikes turn a Gaza hospital into a graveyard. Why Australia wants Iran's ambassador to leave. Why India's Supreme Court wants internet influencers to face regulation. And the next big space mystery, the discovery of a quadruple star system. We'll tell you what that is. The headlines first. Heavy rains wreak havoc across North India, trigger floods and landslides in Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh. Several buildings collapsed as shops and houses were swept away. Key highways have been cut off due to flooding. Punjab and Rajasthan have been badly hit by the rains as well. Sri Lanka's former president Ranil Wickremesinghe gets bail. The relief comes 4 days after his arrest. He has been accused of misusing state funds for an overseas visit. Earlier in the day, the riot police clashed with Wickremesinghe's supporters who had gathered outside the court where his bail plea was to be heard. Donald Trump orders the removal of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, citing allegations of false statements on her mortgage agreements. But the official says Trump has no authority to fire her and she won't resign. This comes amid Trump's battle with the US Central Bank over interest rates. The government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels begin peace talks in Doha. The two sides had inked a ceasefire deal in July, which aimed to end the violence in the DRC's mineral-rich east. Previous ceasefire agreements between the Congolese government and the Rwanda-backed M23 have failed to last for long. And Kosovo MPs finally pick a speaker after 6 months, dozens of failed votes and 2 court orders. This was their 58th attempt. The stalemate had continued since the February elections. The vote now clears the way for the formation of a new government. In less than 24 hours from now, Donald Trump's tariffs will take effect. That's 50% duty on Indian goods. They will come into effect on the 27th of August. As we speak, there is no trade deal on the table, no last-minute announcements from Donald Trump and no surprise posts about a breakthrough. Instead, Washington has sent a notice to New Delhi. The communication came from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It said that at midnight New York time, the U.S. will charge 50% tariff on Indian imports. So Trump's punitive tariffs are now locked in. The stock market has responded on expected lines. Both the Sensex and the Nifty fell sharply in today's trade. Most major sectors were in the red. So India is bracing for short-term pain, but it is not bending to Trump's diktats. In fact, hours before the tariffs kick in, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has sent a strong message.
आज भारत की मेक इन इंडिया इस यात्रा में एक नया अध्याय जुड़ रहा है। ये मेक इन इंडिया, मेक फॉर द वर्ल्ड हमारे उस लक्ष्य की तरफ एक बड़ी छलांग है। आज से भारत में बने इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स 100 देशों को एक्सपोर्ट किए जाएंगे।
The Indian Prime Minister was in Gujarat. It's his home state in western India. And there he visited a Maruti Suzuki factory. As you may know, Maruti Suzuki is India's biggest car maker. And today, in Prime Minister Modi's presence, they flagged off a new electric car. It's called e-Vitara. Now, this Indian-made car will be sold in more than 100 countries. And don't mistake this occasion for a mere car launch. It's a message with deep significance. EVs are the future of mobility, and India is charging ahead in that race with Indian-made EVs being sold to the world. Prime Minister Modi highlighted this progress in EV manufacturing.
भारत के पास डेमोक्रेसी की शक्ति है और भारत के पास डेमोग्राफी का एडवांटेज है। हमारे पास स्किल्ड वर्कफोर्स का बहुत बड़ा पूल है। इसलिए कि हमारे हर पार्टनर के लिए विन विन सिचुएशन बनाता है। आज आप देखिए, सुजुकी जापान भारत में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कर रही है और जो गाड़ियां बन रही है वो वापस जापान को एक्सपोर्ट की जा रही है। ये जापान और भारत के रिश्तों की मजबूती तो है ही, भारत को लेकर ग्लोबल कंपनियों के भरोसे को भी ये आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करता है।
It's a fact. Maruti Suzuki introduced cars to India. It was created by the government of India in the 1980s. It was a joint venture between India's Maruti and Japan's Suzuki. The Maruti 800 was a product of that partnership. It became an iconic car, one of India's best-selling vehicles. The 800 was built with Japanese technology. Back then, India depended on Japan for its car industry. But 4 decades later, that picture is changing. Today, Indian factories are supplying cars to Japan. Earlier this year, Suzuki became Japan's largest car importer. Its imports surged by more than 230 times. And this surge was driven by made-in-India vehicles. It shows how India is emerging as a leader in manufacturing. And Trump's tariffs come into force with Prime Minister Modi choosing to focus on the strides that India is making despite the unfair trade war.
भारत यहीं पर रुकने वाला नहीं है। जिन सेक्टर्स में हमने बेहतर परफॉर्म किया है, हमें उनमें और बेहतर करना है। इसके लिए हम मिशन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पर जोर दे रहे हैं। आने वाले समय में हमारा फोकस फ्यूचरिस्टिक इंडस्ट्री पर होगा। सेमीकंडक्टर सेक्टर में भारत टेक ऑफ कर रहा है। देश में इसके 6 प्लांट तैयार होने वाले हैं। हमें सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और आगे लेकर जाना है। साथियों, भारत सरकार ऑटो इंडस्ट्री के लिए रेयर अर्थ मैग्नेट की शॉर्टेज से जुड़ी कठिनाइयों के प्रति भी सजग है। इस दिशा में देश के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने के लिए हमने नेशनल क्रिटिकल मिनरल मिशन भी लॉन्च किया है।
The Prime Minister did not name Donald Trump. He did not mention the trade war or the tariffs. But the connection is clear. The auto sector will be among the worst hit by the new U.S. duties. The big players may be able to absorb the impact, but small and medium enterprises are directly in the line of fire. This includes suppliers of gearboxes and transmission equipment. They're set to face a 50% levy. They account for 25% of India's automotive exports to the United States, and the American market is crucial for them. About 40% of their business comes from the US. So the tariffs are a big hit for them. They could slow down orders and production. Then we have textiles, gems and jewelry, and seafood exports. They face a similar challenge. Although some industries have been left out, like pharmaceuticals and electronics. And this includes iPhones assembled in India. For now, they're exempt from the tariffs. And if you look at the big picture, in fact, it's not as bad as many feared. Experts say that India may be able to absorb the shock of these tariffs. Analysts at S&P say that the damage will be limited. Exports worth about 1.2% of India's GDP will be hit, and this is being called a one-off shock. It will not derail India's long-term growth story. That's what most analysts believe, and that is the point that the Prime Minister is also making. On the eve of the tariff deadline, he's sending a signal that India is preparing to turn this challenge into opportunity. Manufacturing is about to take center stage. It will be at the core of India's strategy to offset the tariffs. Donald Trump has a new enemy in his trade war. And this time it's not China or Canada. It is anyone daring to tax American tech giants. Look at this post on Truth Social. The US president said, and I quote, "I will stand up to countries that attack our incredible American tech companies unless these discriminatory actions are removed. I, as President of the United States, will impose substantial additional tariffs on that country's exports to the USA." Quite the warning from Washington. But it did not stop there. Trump continued with his crusade on Truth Social, and I will quote again from what he said. "America and American technology companies are neither the piggy bank nor the doormat of the world any longer. Show respect to America and our amazing tech companies or consider the consequences." So to sum it up, countries impose digital taxes on America's big tech. Trump does not like it, so he wants these measures to be rolled back. If not, he will impose additional tariffs on those countries. And not just that, he will even restrict access to America's most sensitive technology to them. So the message is unmistakable. If you regulate Silicon Valley, Washington will hit back. But what exactly are these digital taxes, and why is Trump against them? First of all, Trump's claims are misleading. These taxes were not introduced to antagonize the US. They were designed to fix a loophole. You see, for decades, international tax law was built around physical presence, the idea that you only pay corporate tax where you have an office, a factory, or a warehouse in a country. That's where you pay taxes. But big tech does not work that way. A company like Google can earn billions in ad revenue from users anywhere in the world, and that too without Google's physical presence in those countries. So digital service taxes, or DSTs, are a way to address that. They allow fair revenue distribution. And not just that, they also help in other things, like they level the playing field. That's the first point. Local startups and businesses pay domestic taxes without DSTs. They are at a disadvantage against untaxed global giants. That's the first thing. The second thing they fix is tax avoidance. Big tech often shifts profits to low-tax jurisdictions like Ireland. DSTs are a workaround to that. 3, raising revenue. As economies move online, governments need new revenue streams. The mechanisms are quite straightforward. DSTs target only the largest companies. They tax revenue by where the user is located. It is applied regardless of where the firm is headquartered. Now, several European nations have these taxes in play. The likes of France, Spain, and Italy, they have such taxes. The UK also has a digital service tax. Canada had one in place until June, but they scrapped it to smooth trade negotiations with Trump. So they made that concession, which brings us to Trump's counter argument. The US president sees it differently. For him, these taxes are not fair play. They are protectionism in disguise. He argues that countries like Britain or France wouldn't dare slap the same rules on Chinese giants. And so according to him, according to Donald Trump, digital taxes are not about fairness at all. They're about singling out American champions, big American companies. It's classic Trump framing. America is the victim, and he is the only one willing to fight back. That's what he's trying to show. But here's the problem with this. If Trump succeeds in this, it sets a dangerous precedent. It means that the US can veto any nation's tech laws. Today it's a 2% tax. Tomorrow it could be Europe's strict privacy laws, or Australia's demand that Facebook pay news outlets, or India's insistence on storing sensitive personal data locally. It could be any of these things. And in that world, national sovereignty takes a backseat. Washington's approval becomes the final word. And this is precisely why digital sovereignty is the need of the hour. Because the fight is no longer just about taxes or tariffs. It's about whether nations can set their own rules for the digital economy, that too without fear of retaliation. And there's another question that is haunting the world. Will this stop at tariffs? Or are we drifting into a different future, one where every rule governing data, ads, privacy and content moderation is a potential trade flashpoint? The fight over digital taxes is not really about money. It's about power. It's about who gets to write the rules of the internet. Is it governments trying to protect their citizens? Is it corporations trying to maximize profit? Or is it a US president wielding tariffs like a sledgehammer? And this will impact more than digital taxes. It's the opening battle in a longer war over who owns the future of the internet. Speaking of trade and taxes, Donald Trump has picked a fight with China again. This time it's over the supplies of rare earths. These are minerals essential for making all modern gadgets. China has a monopoly on rare earths. Ever since Trump returned to office, both sides have been clashing on this front. When Trump first announced his tariffs, Beijing responded by cutting rare earth supplies. China showed Washington just how easily it could choke the market. And now Trump is striking back. He has issued his biggest threat yet. Trump has threatened a 200% tariff on China.
Say you economically with China now getting much better. They have to give us magnets. If they don't give us magnets, then we have to charge them 200% tariff or something, you know. But we're not going to have a problem, I don't think, with that.
China curbed the exports of rare earth magnets in April. This was a direct response to Trump's trade war, and this is hurting the US. Like I said, rare earth minerals and magnets are critical for any modern-day technology. Your smartphones, electric cars, wind turbines, even missiles, they all need these magnets and rare earths. And China controls this market. It controls 90% of the global rare earth supply. That is Beijing's leverage. So when exports were cut, the impact was immediate. By the month of June, Washington was forced to negotiate with China. A temporary truce was reached, and China agreed to resume the shipments. But that truce is fragile. And now Trump is back with a new warning. He says if China cuts magnet supplies again, the US will respond with a 200% tariff. So the question is, what leverage does Trump have over the Chinese? What can he wield against them? And Trump answered that by pointing towards airplane parts.
200 of their planes were unable to fly because we were not giving them Boeing parts purposely, because they weren't giving us magnets. Therefore, we weren't giving them. But we have a much more powerful thing that's tariffs. If we wanted to put 100%, 200% tariffs on, we wouldn't do any business with China. And, you know, it would be okay, too, if we had to.
So Trump wants to negotiate with China with airplane parts. He called them a powerful thing. Well, they could be a powerful thing. But is this an effective leverage? If China loses supply of airline parts, what happens? Will it be forced to concede on rare earths? Well, it's unlikely, and I'll tell you why. Airline parts affect a single industry. They affect China's airlines and their fleet. So the damage will be there, but it will be limited. Plus, China can buy spares from elsewhere. It can service older planes. And even if some jets are grounded, the impact on China's economy will not be overwhelming. On the other hand, if China cuts off rare earth supplies, the impact would be far-reaching. And China already demonstrated this earlier this year. When it curbed exports of rare earths, factories had to shut down. Ford had to halt production. European car makers also struggled. Even Indian automakers raised concerns. They were unable to get supplies of Chinese rare earths. Supply chains were broken. And these were just the immediate consequences. And they hit multiple American industries, not just one. This is what forced the US to negotiate with Beijing, and shipments resumed only after Beijing agreed. Now, this episode showed how the world needs access to Chinese rare earths. In fact, here's how one European leader described it, and I'm quoting, "Our dependence on Russia for energy is very mild compared to our dependence on China for critical minerals. We've bet everything on the green economy and China could shut us down." Well, this is the ace in Beijing's hand. When Trump announces tariffs, China can respond by cutting supplies, and when it does, the effect will be immediate and wide. It will be felt across industries and geographies. So here's how the US and China are poised. Trump has airplane parts, China has rare earths. One is a single industry, the other is the foundation of the modern economy. As things stand, Trump's leverage looks limited, and while China will bleed if the trade war goes out of hand, it still has a strong hand. It could have gone either way for South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. He arrived in Washington this week hoping to crack a trade deal with Donald Trump, but the backdrop was messy. South Korea is still reeling from last year's martial law crisis. That's when the former president tried to impose martial law to hold on to power. Seoul is still grappling with the aftermath. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is still eager to reassert his role as a global deal maker. And North Korea is still testing missiles while flirting with Moscow. In this backdrop, South Korean President Lee came to Washington. This was a high-wire encounter. Just hours before the meeting, Trump blasted out a cryptic post on Truth Social. He warned, and I'm quoting, he warned of a purge or revolution in Seoul. Now, for a moment, it looked as if Lee might be ambushed, that he might be forced to defend himself against conspiracy theories rather than discuss policy. Instead, the encounter became something else entirely. Trump mellowed, Lee charmed, and the headlines were about a third man who's not even in the room. So here are the top takeaways from this meeting. Number one, Kim Jong-un was the third man who was talked about, who ruled the headlines. No matter who sits opposite him, Donald Trump drags the North Korean leader into the conversation. And this time was no different. Trump made it clear that he wants to meet Kim again, possibly this year.
Relationship with Kim Jong-un. I hope it stays that way. I think it will. I have a very good relationship. I understand him. I spent a lot of free time with him talking about things that we probably aren't supposed to talk about. And, you know, I get along with him really well. I think he has a country of great potential, tremendous potential.
Is it possible you meet him this year or maybe next year?
Well, I'm meeting a lot of people. I mean, it's hard to say that, but I'd like to meet him this year.
During his first term, Trump met Kim thrice, and he wants to do the same this time. Also for Trump, these meetings are less about arms control and more about personal chemistry. He talks about Kim as if they're old college roommates, letters exchanged, long talk shared, mutual respect affirmed. Whether Kim actually wants such a meeting or not is another matter altogether. So far, Pyongyang has ignored South Korean President Lee, and it has only half engaged with Trump's overtures since his return to office. And yet, Donald Trump is betting that Kim will eventually want to meet him and sign a deal. And Lee, the South Korean leader, fed into that mythology. He flattered Trump. He even joked about building a Trump Tower in Pyongyang, the North Korean capital.
So, I look forward to your meeting with Kim Jong-un and construction of a Trump Tower in North Korea and playing golf. I believe he will be waiting for you. Korea is able to attain economic growth and development through our ironclad alliance. And going forward, I hope to develop our alliance into a future-oriented alliance that encompasses areas not only limited to security, but also the economy and science and technology.
Which brings us to point number 2. The survival strategy is flattery. Lee Jae-myung arrived in Washington with a problem. Trump does not trust South Korea. He often accuses it of freeloading of American troops, while also running up trade surpluses. Worse, Lee is viewed as, in some conservative US circles, as anti-American. So his answer to this problem was praise, humor, and a dash of self-deprecation. He complimented the decor of the Oval Office. He called Donald Trump indispensable, and he lauded Trump's efforts at peacemaking.
And one thing that I wanted to say to you is that America's role not as a keeper of peace, but a maker of peace is emerging more evidently. Many wars in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and in the Middle East are coming to peace because of the role that you are playing. So among the many world leaders, I believe that you are the only leader who has made such accomplishments. And I would like to mention that the only remaining divided nation in the world is the Korean Peninsula. And I would like to ask for your role in establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula.
If it looked over the top, that's because it was, and it was so by design. Lee needed to leave Washington without becoming another Zelensky or Ramaphosa, the respective presidents of Ukraine and South Korea. Zelensky and Ramaphosa, both leaders were left sparring with Trump. And takeaway number 3 from the meeting, trade was the elephant in the room, but they chose not to touch it. Officially, the purpose of Lee's White House visit was quite simple: iron out details of a new trade deal and clarify the role of U.S. troops on the Korean Peninsula. In practice, both leaders tiptoed around the specifics. Trump declared, and I quote, "I think we have a deal." But he offered no detail of the deal.
Yeah, I think we have a deal done. They had some problems with it, but we stuck to our guns. We are going to, they're going to make the deal that they agreed to make. And he's a very good guy, a very good representative for South Korea. It's a very big trade deal. You know, it's the biggest deal they've ever made by far, but it's one of the biggest deals ever made. The biggest deal ever made is the one with the European nations, as you know. The Europe deal is the biggest deal ever made.
Lee smiled, avoided objections, and let the cameras roll. But the reality is this: South Korea has agreed to invest hundreds of billions in U.S. industries, all while tariffs on its exports remain higher than Seoul would like. But for now, neither side wanted to spotlight the sticking points, which brings us to the last takeaway from this meeting. The U.S.-South Korea alliance is both stable and fragile. The optics suggested harmony, but the subtext is trickier. Trump floated the idea of the U.S. outright owning the land under the Osan Air Base. Now, that is one of the 2 major U.S. Air Force installations in South Korea. Trump says America owns the land. It's an astonishing suggestion that could inflame South Korean politics. Plus, he reminded reporters that Seoul needs to pay more for U.S. protection. And while both sides agreed on peaceful denuclearization, neither has a clear path to get there. So the alliance may be essential in theory, but it remains brittle in practice, vulnerable to Trump's whims, Lee's domestic pressures, and Kim's provocations. So this Oval Office moment was not about breakthroughs, you could say. It was about survival. Lee walked away intact, and Trump walked away flattered. For all the talk of tariffs, bases, and deals, the real story is this: Donald Trump still wants to script the ending to his unfinished love story with Kim Jong-un. And South Korea knows it has little choice but to play along. And now to our Vantage exclusive. Fiji's Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka is visiting India. This is his first official visit since taking office in December 2022. Yesterday he met Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He held wide-ranging talks. The focus was on regional security, strategic cooperation and maritime defense. This visit comes at a critical moment. Tensions are growing in the Indo-Pacific. China's expanding military presence has triggered fresh concerns. Island nations like Fiji face growing risks, both to their security and their sovereignty. The issue was high on the agenda for yesterday's talks between the 2 prime ministers. India has made firm commitments to Fiji. It will provide training and equipment to strengthen Fiji's maritime forces. Several key agreements were also signed. They cover defense, trade, healthcare, and cultural exchanges. India and Fiji share more than diplomacy. They share history, people, and now a common strategic vision. So how will this relationship evolve? We sat down with Prime Minister Rabuka to find out. Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka, welcome to India, and thank you for joining us here on Firstpost.
Thank you very much.
First, I want you to tell our viewers about your personal relationship with India. You've studied here, you've been here before. Tell us about your association with this country.
I was fortunate to have been selected and offered an Indian government scholarship in 1979 to undergo studies at the Defense Services Staff College in Wellington, Tamil Nadu. And I was trained by one of the best generals that the Indian Army produced in those decades, and General Rodriguez. I was in the same syndicate as someone who became Chief of the Navy, Admiral Prakash, and I trained with an international group of friends who became very close friends and long-term friends. I have new knees. These are titanium knees that I have. They were replaced by Dr. Bharat Modi of Vadodara, one of the best knee surgeons in the world. And he operated my knees and gave me new titanium knees in 2006, and they're still new. So for me personally, it's good to be back. I owe a lot to India, and Fiji owes a lot to India and the Indian people.
And you've now built relationships as a political leader, as the Prime Minister of Fiji. Tell us about your interactions with Prime Minister Modi and the equation that you share with him.
Well, I'm older, but he's more senior. He is a great statesman. His priorities for India are the same priorities that any aspiring leader or any leaders in the world, particularly in the global south and the smaller island nations of the Pacific. And he's very determined to eradicate poverty in India. So that is something that most global south leaders should be concentrating on, should be focusing on. And we thank, I thank Prime Minister Modi for the example he has shown the global south.
Defence is emerging as an important dimension of this partnership, and I understand in your conversation with the Indian Prime Minister, you've agreed to strengthen ties, including joint efforts in peacekeeping, cybersecurity and maritime surveillance. What does it mean really for Fiji's security in practical terms?
That is very important for us. It's part of the Ocean of Peace concept, and we just would like to maintain stability in the region. That we are asking that the bigger powers do not bring their conflict into the Pacific, and perhaps pull some of the island nations towards them into their camp. It's more coercion than cooperative, than cooperation.
And earlier this year, you publicly stated that Fiji would not welcome a Chinese military base in the Pacific. Let me quote from what you said: if they want to come, who would welcome them, not Fiji? What led you to take this position?
Well, I just thought that strategically they do not need to be in the Pacific. They can do everything they want to do from China. There's really no need for them. We offer every country in the world freedom of navigation. We offer our port facilities to them, and we facilitate their trans-Pacific navigation. And welcome their flights over our airspace. So I hope that doesn't make them jealous of each other. They are given equal opportunities for those by Fiji. So there's really no need for any of them to come and stake claim in Fiji and say, we're here, we got here first.
Are you under pressure? Do you feel under pressure from any side?
No. I do not feel any pressure because I deal with their diplomats and with their leaders very openly. They understand me and I understand them. So they cannot really pressure me.
As part of your recent agreement, India is going to be sending a naval ship and deepening maritime relationships with Fiji. What role do you see for India in your region?
India has sent naval ships to Fiji in the past. And it's not brought any displeasure to our attention from China or any other powers in the world, because it's natural for for us to continue doing that.
Do you see a role for India in the event of a conflict in the Pacific?
Do I?
See a role for India in the event of a conflict in the Pacific?
A conflict between whom and whom?
Oh, well, there are a lot of players. This is a hypothetical question, but do you see a role for India?
Well, India's voice is very influential in the world. Their voice as a global leader, as an international leader, as a powerful economy in the world, they should be listened to. How many countries in the world have more than 1 billion population? 2. And India is one of them.
And the only one that upholds the global rules-based order. Would you welcome more Indian military voyages and defense drills in your part of the world to challenge those who may be, weakening the rules-based order?
I have always maintained that it's better to continue working with those that you're familiar with and you have worked with for decades. There's no reason for us to abandon that good relationship that we have had with India in favor of anybody else.
Absolutely. And sometimes, despite a long association, there are surprises. I'm talking about the Trump tariffs. Donald Trump imposed shockingly high tariffs of 32% on Fiji. You said that this came without warning. It has since been slashed to 10 to 15%. And yet, do you worry about the unpredictability of your relationship with the U.S. under President Trump?
When they made the initial announcement, I said, we're not strong enough, we're not big enough to have a trade war with the United States of America. They're too big. All we have to do is to try and negotiate out of the difficulties that we could have and look for other destinations for our exports. We are too small to tell America, go do something. If they raise the tariffs on our exports into America.
Did the tariffs come up in your talks with Prime Minister Modi?
I sympathize with him.
No, did you discuss it? Did
Sorry?
you discuss it with him?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We discussed it, and the punitive reaction to his trade with Russia, I believe, is unfair, but they are sovereign decisions, which nobody else has any business in.
So Donald Trump is using tariffs and trade as a tool to put pressure on other countries, even to resolve global conflicts and to reshape international relations. Do you think this policy is working, or is it just feeding to the chaos?
For the moment, it is not all working in his favor. And I'm sure the world and world leaders can weather it.
So you think that the U.S. is headed down that road, that they're
I believe the
burning
United States
bridges?
knows exactly what's happening. They know that they will lose some friendship, but it will not be long term. It'll come back.
Thank you for your time, your vision, your candor. I think for India and Fiji, this relationship is not just about history, it's also about shaping the future of the global south and indeed the world. So we wish you all the success.
Thank you very much. We will continue to be your friends.
Thank you, sir. It was one of the deadliest days yet for the press in Gaza. A hospital was turned into a graveyard. 2 Israeli strikes on the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis killed at least 20 people. Among them were 5 journalists. They were working for some of the world's biggest newsrooms like Reuters and AP. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called it a tragic mishap. Israel has promised an investigation into these strikes, but critics say this was not an isolated incident. Nearly 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza since the war began, making it the deadliest conflict for the press in history. Our next report brings you the details.
Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza's main medical lifeline, was already overwhelmed with patients and relatives. The weary doctors who hadn't had a full night's sleep in months. Then came the first strike. a blast that shattered glass and sent people diving for cover right at the entrance. Among those rushing in were journalists. It is what they do: grab the camera, steady the microphone, get close enough to bear witness. And then came the second strike. The staircase where journalists had gathered to film the aftermath became a target itself. A blast ripped through, engulfing rescuers, emergency workers, and reporters in smoke and rubble. Cameras cut off mid-feed. A Reuters cameraman, Husam al-Masri, had been operating a live broadcast and was killed while doing it. By the time the dust cleared, at least 20 people were dead. 5 of them were journalists, names familiar to their colleagues across the world. Husam al-Masri and Hatem Khalid from Reuters, Mariam Daga from Associated Press, Mohammed Salama from Al Jazeera, and freelance photographer Moz Abu Taha, who had worked with several international outlets. They had been the eyes of the global community in a place where the world itself has been shut out. Israel called it a tragic mishap. Prime Minister Netanyahu promised an investigation.
I would like to be clear from the start. The IDF does not intentionally target civilians. The IDF makes every effort to mitigate harm to civilians while ensuring the safety of our troops. Any incident that raises concern in this regard is addressed by the relevant mechanisms in the IDF. We are operating in an extremely complex reality. Hamas terrorists deliberately use civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, as shields. They have even operated from the Nasser hospital itself.
But in Gaza, there is little faith in inquiries. This was not the first time journalists were struck. Just 2 weeks earlier, 6 reporters, 4 of them with Al Jazeera, were killed near Al-Shifa Hospital. And this war, by the count of the Committee to Protect Journalists, has already become the deadliest conflict for the press ever recorded. Nearly 200 journalists have died since October 2023. That's more than journalists that have died worldwide in the 3 years before the war combined.
The Secretary General strongly condemns the killings of Palestinians today in Israeli strikes that hit Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. Those killed, in addition to civilians, included medical personnel and journalists. We want to extend our condolences to families and colleagues of those journalists killed, especially those representative of the Associated Press, Reuters, and Al Jazeera who are in this room or online. These latest horrific killings highlight the extreme risks that medical personnel and journalists face as they carry out their vital work amidst this brutal conflict.
But Israel is pressing forward with its offensive in Gaza City. Hamas had agreed to a framework of a peace deal last week, but Israel is yet to agree to it, according to Qatar. Doha says they are still waiting for an Israeli response. Meanwhile, Israelis have begun a nationwide day of protests, blocking highways and burning tires. They are demanding for a ceasefire deal that would bring hostages back home. So as the Gaza war grinds on one side of the border, families are demanding the safe return of their loved ones. On the other, families are burying theirs. And in between, the people who risked everything to tell the story are getting silenced in the line of duty.
The Iranian ambassador to Australia has 7 days. 7 days to leave the country because he has been expelled. This is a first for Australia since the Second World War, the first time they've expelled an ambassador. And at the core of this is an explosive allegation. Last year, Australia witnessed 2 anti-Jewish attacks. Their intelligence team began an investigation. The investigation went on for months, and now finally the report is out. It says that Iran was behind the attacks. Australia has accused Tehran of directing anti-Semitic attacks on Australian soil. It has partially severed diplomatic ties with Tehran. It has suspended operations at its embassy in Iran. It has expelled the Iranian envoy along with some other officials. Iran has, of course, rejected the allegations. Meanwhile, Israel has praised Australia. which is also quite interesting because just a few days back, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu had called his Australian counterpart, and I'm quoting, a weak politician who abandoned Australia's Jews. Here's a report.
On October 10th, 2024, a kosher cafe in Sydney, the Lewis Continental Kitchen, was attacked. About 2 months later, on December 6th, the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne came under attack. In both these cases, there were no casualties. But in both incidents, assailants set fire to the properties, causing a lot of damage and sending shockwaves through Australia. So the government set out to investigate the matter. The Australian Security Intelligence Organization probed the matter. And finally, the finding is out. According to the ASIO, Iran was behind the attacks. Canberra has accused Tehran of directing anti-Semitic attacks on its soil.
ASIO has now gathered enough credible intelligence to reach a deeply disturbing conclusion that the Iranian government directed at least 2 of these attacks. These were extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression orchestrated by a foreign nation on Australian soil. They were attempts to undermine social cohesion and sow discord in our community.
So now, the Australian government has partially severed diplomatic ties with Iran. Canberra has withdrawn its own diplomats from Tehran. The Iranian ambassador in Australia has been expelled. He has been given 7 days to leave. This is the first time since the Second World War that Australia has expelled an ambassador. The government has also urged Australians not to travel to Iran. But that's not all. The Australian intelligence services say that they have uncovered links between the attacks and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. This is a branch of the Iranian military. It plays a key role in the country's defense and regional operations. The Australian government has accused it of using a complex web of proxies to hide its involvement in the attacks, like members of organized crime gangs. Now, Australia wants to designate IRGC as a terrorist organization. And Tehran is aghast.
The accusation that has been made is absolutely rejected. This decision seems to have been influenced by the internal developments in Australia.
But Israel has praised Australia for its quote-unquote principled stand.
This is a step we have long advocated for. Iran's regime is not only a threat to Jews or Israel, it endangers the entire free world, including Australia.
And the timing is interesting. Australia's ties with Israel have hit a low in recent weeks. Over Canberra's criticism of the famine and war in Gaza, as well as its decision to join France, the UK and Canada in recognizing a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. So last week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called his counterpart Anthony Albanese a weak politician who betrayed Israel and abandoned Australia's Jews. So the Albanese government hit back at Netanyahu, saying that strength is not measured by how many people you can blow up or how many children you can leave hungry. But now, Australia is making bold and loud moves to tackle anti-Jewish sentiment in the country. It may well be a ripple effect of Netanyahu's rhetoric, but one thing is clear. Australia-Iran relations have been truncated to the quiet satisfaction of Israel.
Freedom of speech. In India, this is a fundamental right. It is guaranteed by the Constitution. But what happens when this right is monetized? Well, this is the question India's apex court has tried to answer. That's the Supreme Court of India. It has heard a case against social media influencers, those making insensitive jokes about persons with disabilities. The apex court has called it an abuse of free speech. It said, when you commercialize free speech, you should not hurt sentiments. And that's not all. The Supreme Court has urged broader action. It has asked the centre to regulate influencers, to come up with guidelines, to set up guardrails and a mechanism to balance freedom of speech with accountability. So what would such a framework look like? Is it too idealistic to be true? And how do other countries regulate influencers? Here's a report.
When you are commercializing free speech, you should also bear in mind not to hurt the sentiments of certain sections of the society. This is what India's apex court has said. This week, the Supreme Court heard a case against 5 comedians who had been accused of making insensitive jokes about persons with disabilities. This included Samir Raina. He hosted a show on YouTube called India's Got Latent, along with 4 of his co-comedians. The court has said that the comedians abused freedom of speech and expression, that they commercialized free speech while hurting people's sentiments. The court has directed the 5 comedians to issue a public and an unconditional apology on their respective platforms. But that's not all. The Supreme Court says that there should be accountability and that freedom of expression must be exercised responsibly. After all, in recent years, a range of influencers have come to the fore. They're not just dancing to trendy songs or baking banana bread. They have tens of millions of followers. They are changing opinions, shaping minds, spreading information, and in many cases, misinformation. Social media trends have come and gone, but regulation has been scrambling to catch up with influencers. Now, the Supreme Court of India says not anymore. India's top court has urged the union government to form guidelines to regulate conduct on social media, to set up guardrails that cover everything from influencer reels to podcasts. Of course, this may be easier said than done. After all, many fear that regulation comes at the cost of freedom. So the key issue is to balance free speech with accountability and dignity. And it's a complex task, but a crucial one. Because as the court points out, unless effective consequences are framed, police can zigzag their way out of liability. Consequences must be proportionate to the harm done. Which is why the country wants to work towards a framework that can regulate content creation. And India is not an isolated case here. Country after country has tried to bring in laws that regulate influencers and protect users on social media. Like the Online Safety Act in the UK, which puts greater responsibility on online platforms and content creators to save social media users, especially children, from harm. Many countries are working on joining the club, like Australia and Canada, where laws have been proposed to curb misinformation by content creators.
We are setting a new community standard.
But building such policies is tricky business, like in Germany, where the law compels platforms to remove illegal hate speech within 24 hours, or in Ethiopia, where the law criminalizes online hate and disinformation. But it has been criticized for restricting political speech. The hurdles cannot be ignored, but countries are making moves to boost the transparency and accountability of content creation. After all, the global influencer economy stands at $33 billion, so it's important that big money comes with big responsibility.
There are planets, there are stars, and then there is something that falls somewhere in between. Brown dwarfs. These are interstellar objects. They're heavier than gas giant planets, but lighter than stars, which is why they're also called failed stars. And scientists have found them mingling unusually. They have discovered 2 brown dwarfs locked with 2 single stars. It's what they're calling the double-double, or in scientific terms, the quadruple star system. Now, this is incredibly rare, and this exciting discovery unlocks a series of mysteries. Our next report tells you more.
For decades now, scientists have been combing through huge catalogs of stars, the big ones, the faint ones, and everything in between. But over the past few years, one particular type has been the star of the show. Brown dwarf. This is an interstellar object. It is too heavy to be called a gas giant planet, like Jupiter or Saturn, and too light to be a true star. It doesn't have intense pressure or temperature, which is why the cold brown dwarf is often called a failed star. So it fits somewhere between a gas giant and a true star, and it has become a fascinating subject for scientists. But now, they have discovered something even more exciting. When astronomers were scouring through the star catalogs in our galaxy, the Milky Way, they first thought that they saw a lone brown dwarf orbiting a bright star. But then they investigated further and found that what they were seeing wasn't one, but two brown dwarfs. And soon, they realized that the dwarfs weren't dancing around one star. Their companion was a pair of bright stars. If this sounds odd, that's because it is. This is an incredibly rare but interesting star system. What the scientists are calling a double-double. But that's not its scientific name. This discovery is called a quadruple star system, with a brown dwarf mingling with another, locked in an orbit with two bright stars, which are also circling each other. This system is about 82 light-years from Earth. A light-year is the distance that light travels in a vacuum. So 82 light-years means the distance that light travels in 82 years. And in more real terms, it is about 776 trillion kilometers away from Earth. That's unimaginably far. And that is exactly where the quadruple star system exists, in an orbit more than 1,600 times as wide as the distance between our planet and the Sun. Now, quadruple star systems are not unheard of. They are important, because the formation of stellar systems is not a simple process. Think of it as sharing your room with someone. You might just get along, but if you don't, expect uncomfortable, angry clashes. Things can get ugly really fast. And this is kind of how stars work. If they form too close together, they can gravitationally knock each other out and scatter at hyperfast speeds. But some stars survive this process, and they come together to form stellar systems, pardon the pun. Yet, many mysteries lie here. How do the stars get here in the first place? How do these systems come about? This is an especially big question when the brown dwarfs are involved. These objects form like stars, but they have too little mass to fuse hydrogen. This is the process that heats the star and makes it shine. So brown dwarfs are cold and faint, which makes them difficult to study. But when they are near brighter stars, measuring them becomes much easier. So does understanding the star systems that they form. And this is exactly what makes this discovery special, as scientists reach for the stars.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Sweden, a popular church is rolled to its new home. In France, a firefighting helicopter crashes into a pond. In the US, a massive dust storm grounds flights and leaves thousands without power. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1920, the US adopted the 19th Amendment to its constitution. This granted all American women the right to vote. And it was the culmination of a decades-long political struggle. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
Stands at $36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion ka karjo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
$4
Portuguese,
por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.